very grateful to each of you for having accepted to come to participate in this talk. I wish you to continue to enjoy the food. I feel that you'll have to enjoy also the talk. Let me, on behalf of all the men who are here, wish a happy Women's Day to our sisters, women who are here. Today's Women's Day. You know that? So all the women, well, all the men who are here, I wish you, please, women, a nice day for this great day. My topic is a theology of wealth and security. Today's global context of society is characterized, on the one hand, by the impoverishment and the security, and on the other, by welfare, security, and fear of violence. You are challenged to promote, in this context, a theology of wealth and security that can guarantee the well-being of all the world's societies. My contribution to this debate will answer a leading question and introduce subsequent questions that divide my reflection in 4 parts. The leading question is this: what anthropology and theology should people promote and fully commit to in order to create wealth and security for our world today, taking into account Jesus' experience in the desert in Luke chapter 4, when the devil offered him riches in terms of bread, power, and honor. The 4 secondary questions are: in what context should we answer this leading question to help as many people as possible participate in the debate and contribute to its enrichment? Second question: what do wealth and security mean for people in this context? And what should we say about the inherent paradoxes? Third question: what can we learn from Jesus' experience and teachings about how to respond to the problem, taking into account the sustainability of wealth and security and our responsibility and commitment as human beings? Finally, learning from Jesus, how should we respond concretely to the challenges of wealth and security in our contemporary societies? This presentation is a short version of the ongoing research I'm doing as a research fellow at the Center for the World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology here at Ivory Coast University, DePaul University. African countries, from Catholic Theology Constitution in Kenya, Nigeria, Tanzania, and so on, where the decision with which this center established a relationship many years ago. By inviting me as a research fellow, the center is now extending its network to French-speaking African countries, mainly the Ivory Coast, where I've been teaching for many years, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, Kinshasa, where I serve as a visiting professor. This also explains why we are hearing English with a French-speaking English accent. And you know that it is with an accent which is not as good as your American English. So I do apologize for this lack in terms of pronunciation you are used to. Responding to the first question, I talk about the problem and the context of analysis. The desire to be rich and live in safety are the main concerns of anyone who has reached adulthood. After receiving adult education or training, responsible individuals usually engage in attempt to acquire wealth. We find ourselves here in a jungle, struggle to ensure wealth and security. After attaining a higher standard of living and reaching a certain financial security, there is a risk that we may isolate ourselves from the poor and higher private security to protect us and our businesses. Private security companies and social security means have thus developed in recent years around the world. However, in both cases, it is up to the political power to ensure public safety. Many people are afraid to move around in the city where they live or to travel beyond the borders of their country. The state today, then, is obliged to increase its security measures and laws. But, there is a but we can't find fulfillment in the life by withdrawing and locking ourselves up in our homes out of fear for our safety. And in protecting our own and others' wealth means that we have to surround ourselves with all kinds of sophisticated security system. We won't be living happily or moving freely. Therefore, we should rethink wealth and how we can live differently with wealth, remembering that it is Jesus Christ for us, who is the source of the true wealth and security, past, present, and future. Going from this context, I try to answer the second question in this topic, wealth and security and their paradoxes. What do you mean wealth and security for people? You have to go from what they think about security. What should they mean? People usually understand wealth as the physical, material, moral, and so on goods that allow a human being to have a fulfilled and fruitful life. Just as death is the antithesis of life, so is poverty the antithesis of wealth. You understand security as those things that guarantee his peace, protecting, reassuring, and offering us a serene, friendly, and sustainable way of life that is free of any anxiety. And so, in this sense, wealth implies security, and we might say that those who enjoy wealth and security are happy. Unfortunately, in the actual reality of life, we find that wealth does not always come with security. Wealth has paradoxes and doesn't always offer the people the security it implies, and they are waiting for from it. Individuals who seek a happy life and the peace that guarantees it must often face adversities and violence. This experience in the quest for wealth and security has led a famous Latin saying, many of us know this saying, si vis pacem para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. But here is a paradox. Once the war is over, we might not have the wealth we expected to. Or if we do, we may find that security hasn't come with it. And even we acquire wealth through hard work, sacrifice, and honesty, we have no guarantee that it will last and that it will remain secure. Other paradox. No matter how many security measures we take, no how many alarm system or insurance policies we have, from day to day, situation beyond our control and arrest that can take this wealth away, leaving us in poverty, misery, helplessness, and even death. Here again is another paradox of wealth. Wealth and security often result in creating a closed world where people are locked up in their own home or neighborhoods, unable to come and go freely in the world, like all human beings should be able to do. Instead of endowing us with peace and well-being, wealth and security can often create feelings of selfishness, fear, and anxiety in us, maybe even leading to psychological disorders and heretical behavior. Contemporary history reveals in a rather cruel manner this paradox of wealth and security, and this is demonstrated in wealth's relation to the globalization. Globalization should promote unity. It should bring together all men, women, countries, religions throughout the world into the same family. But instead, with globalization, you are witnessing, on the one hand, the emergence of policies of domination on part of the world over another. And on the other hand, we see the resurgence of movements that affirm narrow and sectarian, cultural, nationalistic, and religious identities. Today, globalization also often encounters currents of intolerant, violent thought and action orchestrated by individuals and ideological groups. Paradoxically, vigorous attempts to curb this movement on their own ground do not succeed. The manage to desert their home bases or move elsewhere, we see them infiltrate the nations of their detractors, even using social media there to recruit followers, the majority of whom belong to the Christian tradition and culture. Paradox. There are many reasons for these paradoxes. The root of the problem is ignorance of what wealth truly means and the commitment it demands from us as responsible human beings. You should delete the title you have there. To fully understand the meaning of wealth and its demands, which include promoting security, you must distinguish between the different forms of wealth and the terms and conditions to assume that allow us to benefit from its resources and to keep ourselves safe from any insecurity. In my research, my ongoing research, I distinguish 5 types of wealth: natural or raw wealth, material, physical, mineral, vegetal, and so on, wealth that exists in the world independent of human beings. It is both visible and visible. We truly exist as human beings when we are set transcendence over the so-called natural world through labor and creativity. We have inherited from civilizations and cultures. This type of wealth is related to the historical or social nature of human being. We come into a world that precedes us through the community and its history. That welcomes, educates, and trains us through a heritage of wealth, values, law, and so on. Third, wealth as creator of riches. It is the human being that makes raw wealth and cultural inherited wealth productive. Human beings are subject to present the wealth par excellence of the macrocosm. Through humans, the first 2 types of wealth can be transformed and increased. Fourth, wealth produced. This form of wealth emanates from the responsibility we concretely reveal that we as human beings are creators of goods that provide our own food and all the means you need for living. Produce earth must allow the men and women of a country, a region, and the world as a whole to experience integral development, to strive for protection, to strive for perfection, and to fully achieve this perfection in God, especially in God revealed in Jesus Christ. So the fifth wealth has the supreme good. This refers to which brings to This refers to what which brings to supreme good to the human person and to the world, and allow them to achieve fulfillment. Supreme wealth is the quest for perfection that explains human beings' participation in the life of God, who is the creator of the world through Christ our Lord. In conclusion, any produced and developed wealth that divides from moral values, religion, or respect for the rights of individuals and peoples create a society where people are rich at the material level, but impoverished in regard to the values of transcendence, as well as paradoxes. The paradoxes challenge us to become true creators of riches who assume the demands of human finitude and avoid sin that leads us to impoverishment, failure, and insecurity. Taking this condition into account, can we find theological resources in Jesus Christ, historic context, as well as his own experiences and teaching that respond to the wealth and the security problems challenging the church and the society? The experience of Jesus responding to the challenges of wealth and guaranteeing security. The topic is that the experience of Jesus, God made man, supreme wealth, will pave the way to a life endured with wealth that brings with it all the goods and all the guarantees of security. What is the context of Jesus, or at the time he came? The Old Testament prophet describes a situation in which wealth creating wealth, human being, does not fulfill his responsibility with regard to wealth, inherited wealth, and the production of earth. The question wealth creating wealth, human being, why it doesn't practice the justice that will lead the people of God reach the promised land. They also deny the production of wealth that results from injustice. In this context, many people were preoccupied with obtaining for themselves raw wealth, as well as wealth which emanates from the work of others. The production of wealth motivated some to work ingeniously to make raw wealth and inherited wealth fruitful, to share with the poor, and carry out all kinds of activities. But for others, it was rather synonymous with domination, the establishment of a system of theft, violence, and exploitation of the weak, the search for honor and prestige, the quest for liberation in the face of the trials of illness. On the whole, the people of God remained poor and expected from God the wealth that would bring them salvation. What preoccupied them, as well as their leaders, was a wealth generally limited to economic and political level. 63 years before Jesus, they were colonized and put under domination by General Pompey, who conquered Jerusalem and established Roman power in the land. As a result, Messianic groups appear to be multiplying in Israel, particularly in the first century. In this context, The challenge was finally to liberate the people and enable them to acquire wealth, end foreign domination, and realize God's promise to them. Jesus entered the world. The arrival for Jesus. Jesus was born, raised, and educated in the Jewish tradition. According to the custom of these people, he was presented in the temple, received a name, and was circumcised. As he grew up, he went to school and evolved among his peers. Like any Jewish boy, he certainly learned the capital trade of his adoptive father, Joseph, and concerns of his people in the quest of wealth. We discover this particularly through his teaching and his openness to the hopes and dreams of people concerned about their well-being and security. Jesus reaches out the people to people who were, as well those who are able to help them respond to their real desires. He is not ignorant of the difficult situation of young people, children, widows, women, and so on, who desire wealth to the point of treating their materialities like gods. Jesus challenges those who exercise power over others, those who are deaf to the sufferings of the poor, and those who devour their goods. He has experienced in his own flesh that wealth can be problematic not only in terms of people's powerful desire for it, but also in terms of the strong power of attraction it can exert on them. The prince of evil, the devil, will try to divert away from God, Jesus, he tried to divert away Jesus from God, who provides the true wealth, and sent his son to reveal the good news of his salvation to his people. What resources does Jesus Christ offer us in this context? If we consider that the beginning of our participation in society is when we, our young people, reach adulthood and consequently commit to working and producing wealth, I will offer an ethical, theological, and intercultural reading of Luke chapter 4, verses 1 to 21, to illustrate what Jesus can teach us to help us meet the challenges of wealth and security that we have identified. Luke, history of the commitment to the problem of wealth. The culture of the African continent and that of its diaspora contains practices whose features could be found in Luke. In African culture, young men and women are educated through rites and rituals which culminate in their presentation as adults to the entire community. This stage of public presentation is preceded by tests of trials that they must overcome in order to lay the foundation of a responsible existence. These trials make it possible to judge their maturity, their ability to control their bodies, senses, and desires, and to give direction to their lives so as not to alienate themselves from temptation, difficulties, goods, and pleasures, contrary to their society, cultural tradition, and moral values. Before she engaged in society, exercises his ministry, and fulfills his mission of bringing to the world the wealth that fulfilled it, Jesus submit to a test in the desert that completes his formation as an individual and gives him the resource and all the resources necessary to comply with God's plan of salvation. Through this test, he lays the foundation of a responsible existence, self-control, and clarity in the quest for wealth. The quest for supreme wealth, and the consequent radical decision. In Western cultural and philosophical context, we discuss this in particular in moral theology from the perspective of what is called the fundamental option. In Luke chapter 4, verses 1 to 16, Jesus consented to go to the desert under the guidance of the Holy Spirit to experience in his flesh the trials the Israelites or his people face on the march to the promised land, to the inheritance of the wealth that comes from God in the desert. The devil offers him riches other than those of God. Jesus' responses are this: it is written, one does not live by bread alone. It is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him alone you shall serve. You shall not put the Lord your God to the test. Luke concludes, when the devil had finished every temptation, he departed from him for a time. In Genesis, the devil has already done this to Adam and Eve, and it is a problem all human beings face in their desire for well-being in the world. Human life, just like the wealth that helps build it, demand the renunciation of proposal and goods offered by the devil and in opposition to God's purpose regarding the welfare and safety of men and women. On this question, the Luke and text will emphasize the importance of the orientation to be given to existence when one is occupied with amassing riches. In Luke chapter 4, verses 16 to 21, we read that Jesus' focus while teaching in his village synagogue is to accomplish today, through his ministry, God's promise to liberate his people. Luke shows us that Jesus conforms the values of Jewish education to God's purpose in favor of his people. Jesus chose to realize the will of God to provide his people with the true wealth that is salvation. It is the same choice that Jesus had made before the devil in the desert, to become the wealth that produces wealth for the liberation of the poor, and to perform signs that manifest the presence of God's kingdom among his people, not the kingdoms of the earth offered by the devil. Finally, what can we learn from Jesus' experience? Jesus' teaching has a response to the contemporary challenges of wealth and security. There are many ways that Jesus' teaching relates to the challenges of the wealth security, but I will limit myself to just a few here. 1. Wealth, greatness, and the demands of responsibilities and choice. As I described earlier in my intercultural approach to the problem of wealth and security, in anthropological and theological sense, working to earn money is not the priority of young people who have reached adulthood. They are first called to undergo trials that reflect their level of maturity and to commit to basing their goals, activities, and desires on cultural, moral, and spiritual values. Rereading the experience of the people of God as the chosen people and the social cultural context of Jesus shows us that his education has been shaped by the Jewish tradition of trials of human responsibilities. Reinterpreting Luke from this perspective demonstrates that Jesus took a stand with regard to riches, values, beliefs, and practices when the devil came to tempt him. When it comes to wealth and security, the main challenges lie in the fact that people are running after them without any human, moral, spiritual foundation, and without taking the time to understand what wealth and security truly mean and what strengths and problems they raise in our world today. To resolve this problem, we must educate people in the church from childhood on in the value of maturity and the option of giving meaning to their existence and relationships that are called to promote with wealth. We must help people understand that as human beings, you are the primary wealth, the wealth creators, and this is a gift from God. Our greatness as human beings comes from God, who gave us power above all. Above all the other riches and creatures of the world. Our challenge is to conform our daily lives to the demands of the wealth God granted us in our minds and bodies and our environment. Even more, in his son Jesus, God made true wealth known. Jesus taught this to the people, and over them and his disciples, he poured forth the Spirit he received from the Father, so that they may continue his mission of making known and helping people experience the supreme wealth, the kingdom of God. And finally, we must take known to the world, especially to the adult faithful, men and women, young people, make known to the world the gospel's teachings about the kingdom of God and wealth, in order for people to choose the true wealth, that is God's salvation, has the fundamental option. They must first know and understand, as well as the other kinds of wealth and the different prizes, benefits, practices, and principles, which may or not conform to the word of God. Jesus Christ manifested the kingdom of God in his person, his word, and his action only after he went to the desert. There he was able to make sacrifices, exercise self-control, and accept his responsibility before the devil, whose idea of wealth and its demand is contrary to God's plans of salvation. On a final note, we must promote initiatives and find ways approaching each other and touching hearts to impart a better idea of wealth and security to the world. And we must work harder together to break down barriers between the rich and the poor. This is the responsibility of men and women of goodwill, of Christians, and all believers in all religions at the cultural, political, economic, and pastoral level. We must all become actors in the emergence of a new culture of wealth and security, society, and the church, everywhere in the world. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nathanäel, for challenging us with that. We have a few minutes for questions and conversation. If anyone has a question for Nathanäel.
Okay. Yeah.
In your travels now, knowing 5 languages, what common human bridge do you see that can connect, communicating God's beautiful gift to us?
I didn't get all the questions, or you want me to?
What human bridge do we have? Like right now in America, there is polarization between people who have wealth and want to maintain some sort of security, and other people that are coming in needing wealth so that they too can create wealth.
Okay.
And there's a big divide. So the common, there needs to be a bridge from poverty into everybody having the means to achieve creating the basic necessities?
For me, I think that the best language you can use to be together and share with others is our native language. But if you leave your homeland, and you come abroad, mainly you are from Mexico, you are from Chad, and so on, you came here in America, you have to learn the language and try to enrich it with your own native language. So you try to promote society when we enrich one another. But if you want to impose your own native language, you are not at home. For me, that's the problem. We can't necessarily to go from a native language because it provides us fundamental values we learn at home from our mothers and so on. That is very important. But when you are abroad, you have to learn the language of people who welcome you. So you try to enrich this language, and you try to leave yourself enriched by the language. If not, you will impose your language. That is what happened. I'm from Africa. I'm from Benin. My native language is Ewe, but I was obliged to learn French at school. When I came back home, I had to speak Ewe. So when I'm thinking in terms of do research, I'm often thinking in my native language and try to put it in French and now to put English. So you see what we have to face the challenge.
I guess you have the Tower of Babel experience.
Yeah.
Mr. Somebody, thank you so much for your talk. I'm very impressed by several things. I'll speak about one, and I want to make more of a comment, actually. I think the language that you have chosen to use is a language that integrates spirituality with the notion of human development, understanding of human development. You talked about rituals of rites of passage in Africa, in African cultures. That is a language that is universal, that is transcultural, that the need at least exists in all cultures for citizens, for members of the societies to go through some kind of rite of passage. We don't really have that in the West. I mean, we have fraternities and rave parties, and maybe that's really what's so missing in this society or this civilization that is so obsessed with the accumulation of wealth, for which your talk becomes so much more important. But I think the language that you are using and that can be used is this notion that human development and spirituality can be seen as a single kind of thing. And so many of our political leaders and many of us as citizens, we're not really mature. We haven't really developed, even in a basic way, that allows us to use our personalities in wise and responsible ways in terms of how we use power and wealth and seek wealth. So I'm really impressed deeply how you brought us something that's valuable in a global context. And it is a language that can be translated into any culture, because it makes sense and we get it, that human beings need to grow up and use power and wealth wisely, and manage wealth wisely, and see and understand what wealth is in a mature way. It's not just about self, but it's about something greater, a commonwealth, for example.
Yeah, that is a commentary on the, but I had to thank you and, highlight that, I was chaplain for you for 3 years. I was in place in 81. So I was in Paris for 3 months, 3 years, I was chaplain of the youth. So I saw that, often we say that youth, they don't have spirituality or the way is going wrong and bad. But I think that even in the West, there is, in the heart of people, a kind of spirituality. For me, the church did a lot, but in her history, I feel that she failed to express the faith in other to cut people in terms of let the youth and people express their spirituality in another manner. It is why, you know, you come to her today. We are talking about youth and so on, they don't go to Mass, mainly in Europe and so on. But some of them have become today Muslims in Christian traditions. For me, the thing that, you know, we got to find concretely in the heart of the youth and in the heart of the West civilization, the spirituality they have and the spirit they have to promote. In Africa, in fact, you are colonized, but in fact, concretely, we have still our language. For us, it is, you know, it is a wealth, which let us easily to go to the deep spirituality the people bear in the heart. For me, the top is really to find really in the heart of people in the West the spirituality they have, and to find another way. We talk about enculturation to express this kind of spirituality. If you don't do so, you know, people are continuing, you know, the violence and so on, and so on. It is why you have today, you know, prosperity Christianity. It's everywhere, and people, young people that are there, the church are full because they found a way to let them transcend their faith. But you know that it's not excuse that it's not the true Christianity. But we have to learn from them. So we have you know, a lot to do, mainly in the West, as theologians, priests, Christians, so on, to help people rediscover their faith. Mainly, I want to say the spirituality, because the world today, this spirituality has gone, but it's still there in the heart. How to find it, I don't know.
Could I comment on that exchange right there? Because I teach a course here at DePaul on Christianity and consumerism, and I think you're right that there's something there that's kind of universal that people tap into, and it's this connection of the material world with the spiritual world. One of the things that really struck me about your talk was this whole idea of asceticism, that there's a point in people's development where they need to kind of sacrifice and go through an ordeal in order to kind of prove their spiritual mettle in some ways, their spiritual worth. One of the things that we did in this class that I've taught is a 3-week experiment in asceticism, where for 3 weeks we give up meat, alcohol, sugar, cell phones, internet use, all these kind of things, and for a lot of the students, I do it with them, they find it really transformative. You know, one student said that she hadn't heard birds chirp for years because she walks around with earbuds in. But this idea of kind of giving something up in order to achieve something larger is something that we understand in the sports world, but we don't really understand in the spiritual world. But if you give a people a taste of that kind of trial and test, and it becomes something, I think, really liberating. And that's maybe something that we've lost, that African society has to offer us, this idea of these kind of rites of passage where you go through this kind of ordeal. We've gotten too soft. We just kind of want everything. But there is something universal, I think, that taps into.
Not the first there.
Just to comment, I think your paper examines the individual imperative here, but I think there's also a societal one. And I think to address the problem of wealth and security, you have to figure out ways to decouple them. Like, I don't think security should be linked to your wealth. And so we force that on the individual. And I think enlightened society should figure out ways to provide for the wealth, provide for the security, so that wealth becomes less of a battleground. And I would also submit that we should think about things like education as probably one of the most powerful determinants of individual success in terms of both wealth and security. So, you know, in this country, we got to be doubling down and education, making it mandatory, making not just for the wealthy, but for the privileged. So just your comments about the role society plays in this, or a policy level.
Okay, that's a contribution to the debate.
Do you want to respond to that?
That's a contribution to the debate.
Is there a question that you want
Yeah, I
to
just
respond
wonder,
to?
again, you talk about the individual imperative. What about governmental policy?
Okay. Okay, about, that my topic, is in the field of moral theology. We aim at, touching people in their heart and in their style of life. So, government responsibility, we talk about that on social ethics. Here more in the fundamental ethics. It is why I put a great accent on individual responsibilities. But my problem is this. Today we want the states, the government does a lot for us. Even the state is doing his work, our own responsibility is the first to be promoted. If not, what he do is not success. For me today, I feel that the state is doing a lot, but it got to do more for promoting justice, well, for everybody, that's true. But concretely, you are called to know that we can't really have wealth or security if we don't accept how Jesus or in African culture to face the trials. We want a life without problems, without also no. We need that, but we can't anyway, because you are growing to accept to overcome some trials. If you don't do so, the life you'll oblige to that. And that is what happened today. Many people assist me, you can't condemn them, they kill themselves. Why? Because they are not used to solve the problem through the way of trials. So some cultures, they ask people to be able, before begin the life, to respond to responsibility of overcoming the trials. It is the basic of my topic in the field of anthropology. You want
I wanted to ask this question, the use of prosperity gospel, that distinction which many people have made in African theology. You have the upstream, the leaders who you might say, the ones that ride on private jets, and you have downstream people who are hungry, who have no food, who cannot pay for hospital bill, who are dying from diseases, and who are trying to create alternative communities of hope in social capitals, women group, that for them, they don't want to become millionaire. They don't want prosperity. Their understanding is just to have food on the table. So how do you hold this in balance? The idea that when some of these vulnerable people are paying tithe, making contribution to feed into the upstream, the big men and thick madams of the big God, why they're suffering. So, and then we say they are following prosperity gospel. So how do you hold that in balance, especially people who are poor?
Well, in fact, I have said that, I want to talk of my topics in the field of a contest which led us all here to contribute to the debate. So my content is more that of for the West for this topic. In Africa, maybe in Asia or Latin America, we got to help people to promote the wealth. That is very important. Even here, you got to promote the wealth. People, they just want to eat and sleep and dance and so on. But they don't have preoccupation of growing in riches. For these people, so that you have to change the language. If I have to talk about in Africa, see that I put my accent mainly on the production of the wealth and security. So you have to challenge these people. I know that, and I have to work on my paper on preparing a book on the topic. So all these kind of topics should be considered in the work.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you put wealth and security together in your talk. Security is one of my area of interest. I'm a military chaplain, and I'm also a psychologist. And my observation is in my military assignments, I've seen a lot of cultures, and when you have wealth, you have more security problems. And in order to preserve your wealth, you gotta up your security, or more or less, you cannot have both in certain cultures. You can only have one or the other. To have both may be possible, but it's difficult to have. Maybe in the Western world, we can have both at the same time. But my comment is, in the Gospel, especially the Beatitudes, it says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And the original Greek, of course, makarios, which means peace. So, is security tied to having nothing? Because I noticed that, when I go on deployments, the most peaceful people are those who have nothing except clothes on their back. They can go here and there without having to worry about what they're going to leave behind, and they're free to move around. So I thought, well, it's very interesting.
You have to think about all that, but I want to add that, people who are rich or who have, their wealth increasing, they have problem of security. That's true, and they have to face it. But often it is because they don't share enough with others, or their country, or the society, or even themselves. They don't share enough. When you share with people, you have to learn of security and so on. You have to learn better. You don't to be sick because of you are afraid of this and so on. That's the problem. In the past, even in the West, people who are living together that in anxiety. In the past, they share all. But today, you are not a society. When you want to have all for yourself. So you are able to protect yourself. That is the culture you are living. That's going to be. Even you share with people, you have the law of the life. At the moment, you suffer of being, the common breath to be shared with others. That is part of life. But if you have a problem because you are rich, often it is because you don't share enough with others.
Is there, this was outstanding, I appreciate it. Is there some theological justification for security being not necessarily a bad thing, but a good thing? The reason I bring that up is in the context of passages like, God will take care of the birds, just like He'll take care of the birds, you too will be taken care of. But there's often means to do that. I mean, I think it's not to make a joke about it, but every Catholic university in America probably has more employees in campus security than in the theology departments. And that's not just essentially the reality of, we have to protect ourselves. And theologically, the role of stewardship. And stewardship in human ways often translates into security steps that aren't necessarily a bad thing. And I like the references to Luke in the Gospel. I'm just wondering if other areas of the New Testament there isn't equally good references to security in the hands of a responsible steward. And it's not, I'm not trying to, it's just a further thought process on the idea of time. wealth to theology and security, and maybe in a little more way that kind of justifies the security being possibly a good thing in certain situations.
No, I agree with you. We need to promote security. For that, I agree with you. And the state is called to do it. That's very important. It's very important, but it's another field of research. Thinking about promoting the security by the state. That is very important. If not, even the poor cannot live in peace. That is a real problem. But I focus my work, on the duty of people to think from their own how to promote wealth and security, take into account Jesus' experience when he was before the devil. And African culture, which enable people who are adults to be able to overcome trials. So, when you are in the context of wealth or the poverty, you'll be able to be strong. That is meant to be. But after that, there is something that we have to deep.
My name is Moussa Makouder. I'm from Casablanca, Morocco, which is in North Africa. So I do speak French.
Okay.
I have been in Africa, Europe, now in America, and when we say wealth and security, we can ask a question, because here I found something called ideological groups. So we have to ask a question: who creates and finance these ideological groups, and for what purpose? So if we found answer for this question, the violence is gonna stop. And in my life, I'm a Muslim. I live with Christians, Orthodox, Catholics, all of them, Jews. And I found that there is we can't understand Jews. I love Jews, for example. I love Solomon. So we can understand where the Solomon, Moses, Abraham, all those to understand. So the thing is, there is God, the Lord. So what I can call the great architect of universe. If we love for ourselves what we love for others, so we can live peaceful. This is how I see things.
Okay, that is a contribution to the debate. But I have to add that according to our faith and what I believe, I saw maybe many of you also, God is not only the article of the world, He is also a God revealed as Father, Son, and the Spirit.
Also, nowadays we can see like Russia, like in Asia, in other places,
Yeah.
they invest in nuclear weapons more. They invest in people.
Yeah.
I have one question related to the concept of a post-scarcity economy. I was wondering if you could have some of your thoughts on this idea. Just as a brief aside, just to inject my own idea, I feel like Western civilization is currently embarked upon a project to replace nature, and I suppose by extension you could read that as meaning on a project to replace God with our own artifice, with human artifice. Currently we're developing artificial intelligence to make human labor, redundant, unnecessary. There's talk of developing universal basic income to allow folks to survive and earn a living in the context of being unemployable. So I was just wondering if you have any thoughts on that subject, and if you look to a moment in history when we have a post-scarcity economy with anticipation or trepidation.
Okay, sounds good. Keep it as contribution.
Do you want to respond to that, Daniel?
Well, for me, I think it has a contribution to debate. But what I can say is that, for me, we got to avoid to see the West as a society which is, a deliverer of wealth, which impoverishes it. That is very dangerous. You can't don't see the wealth in the bad sense when you're talking about the wealth in Europe or so on, in the West. Because concretely here we have problem also of poverty and so on and so on. You have many problem also. So what I'm talking about, it is not something which will invite us to ignore the real problems of society, mainly in Europe and so on. It's just very complicated. Here in people believe. I talk to the people who I'm living at residence, I'm surprised to see that in the church here in Bethesda. Many people come for the mass on Sunday. There are many. But you are in the West. When you go to France, it's not the same thing. When you go to Belgium, it's different also. So I don't want to make believe that in the West things are going only bad and so on. That's not my ideas.
If there are no more questions or comments, I'd just like to say thank you all for coming, and thank you to Nathanäel. One brief